What's up, everybody? This is Austin with Ozark Pursuit. I really appreciate you watching my reviews and videos. If you want to see more like this, just hit the subscribe button. So whenever I make a new one, it will give you a prompt or an alert, and you'll get to watch future ones. So as I've said in other videos, whoever's into knives understands that if you become a knife person, it's a rabbit hole. It is a total rabbit hole. You might start with a little case folder, that somebody gifted you, like this one, or you might go into a Benchmade Super Freak. It's you never know where you're gonna go. Well, my rabbit hole, as far as the knife world at this point in my life, led me to a hand-forged knife made in Festus, Missouri, by Thomas Hacker, and I call this knife the Hackerforged mountain knife. It is awesome. Hopefully you guys can get some good detail there. So as I've said in previous videos on Instagram and everything else, is he made a couple knives. They were commissioned from my work for some retiring individuals, and they absolutely love their knives. And the first time I met him, I asked if he would make me one. He said, sure. So he gave me some drawings and different ideas and things like that, and we kind of narrowed it down a little bit. But there are so many options out there when it comes to knives. It was really hard for me to make decisions on what I wanted. This looks almost exactly like the drawing that he gave me. He drew by hand. It looks, I wish I had the drawing. I think I have it on Instagram. But this knife is extremely close to that. First thing he asked me was intended purpose. And I told him kind of an all-purpose outdoor knife I can go camping with. I could use it as a survival knife. He said, are you going to be chopping? Are you going to be chopping into trees and branches and things like that? And I said, yeah, there's a possibility. So he said immediately, we need a blade. We need a chopper blade. So this blade right here is about 8 inches, give or take, depending on where you measure it and you wrap around the blade, but it's 8 inches long, and the entire knife is 12.5 inches. So it is not a small knife. It's not your grandma's paring knife. But as far as the purpose intended and everything else, this is exactly what I asked for. As far as the handle material, on my the knives that were bought through coworkers, they were ironwood, and the ironwood looks gorgeous. You'll have to watch my other reviews on Thomas Hacker's knives. They were a little bit smaller knife, 5160 steel, different. And he showed me this option, and I love it because I want a rustic knife. I didn't want anything flashy. I didn't want brass pins or anything like that. I wanted something that looked like a mountain man would carry, and I think this is it. So this handle material right here is a burlap micarta. Micarta traditionally was layered canvas, which is why you'll hear a lot of people call it canvas micarta or linen micarta, and it's layered canvas or linen. In this case, I'm guessing it's burlap, and it's mixed with a epoxy. Some people call it phenolic or phenolic epoxy. Some people call it, and then with G10 you have a resin epoxy, but they're both extremely durable and they're very similar. So once you layer all these things with the epoxy, they compress it down, they heat treat it, and it becomes an extremely durable handle, which is pretty awesome. So it won't necessarily break like wood or swell like wood or anything else. I know wood looks cool, but when you're in the mountains with a Hacker Forged mountain knife, you might want the micarta or the G10. So I almost made this a, like an olive drab, kind of like this color, maybe a little darker, OD green handle. I thought that would be cool, but this thing looks like it could be 100 years old. It's awesome. As far as the finish, he asked if I wanted the forge marks, and I said, you better believe it, because look at this. It just looks completely rustic. It's awesome. I love it. So he put a slight swedge up here, or a harpoon front. I'll just call it a swedge, for lack of better terms. You can see his symbol right there, Thomas Hacker. So it is extremely comfortable in my hand. When I went the first time, I had videos on YouTube of watching him hand forge this. He just pulled, this orange metal bar out of the forge, and he's hammering it with a couple different handles and his anvil and things like that. And he's measuring this with a metal ruler on his bench, and it didn't look anything like a knife. And I expected that because it's handmade, and I get it. We all want immediate gratification. So I'm sitting there watching this, and we're sweating. When he has that forge going, his shop felt like 200 degrees. We were drinking bottles of water and everything. It was awesome, though, just to be a part of it. It really was. I'm grateful that he let me go in and film that and be a part of it. It was really, really neat. So appreciate that, Thomas. And eventually, I looked over, and it looked like a handle. It looked like an ergonomic handle. I just could not believe it. And that's exactly what it is. And if you look, this is very subtle, but he has a 1/4-inch blade stock, and it tapers right there for the ergonomics of the knife. So there's not a whole lot of jimping or anything like that. I'm sure he can do that if you requested it. I just don't feel like it's needed. We'll find out. I did have him put a lanyard hole here. So there's kind of a plastic or composite tubing there, and it goes through the metal, the handle of everything, of course. And I think that will be good for a chopper because we have all of this weight up here, and things happen. When you're in the middle of chopping and stuff like that, it could slip. I normally don't use a lanyard, but I think I will. Okay. As far as the steel, I know I've been holding back on this. So he said you have different options. A lot of my knives, most of my knives, I do 1095 steel. 1095 is a standard, not only with forging, but with knives in general. Earlier in the year, I did a review on this bad boy. This is a Tops Steel Eagle 107C Delta class. This is 1095 steel. A lot of military blades are used out of 1095. It holds a good edge. It's easy to sharpen, and it's a standard that will not go away. So he asked if I was interested in the 1095, and I'm like, yeah. I have a Tops knife with one. I really like it. And I know this is high carbon stuff here. I don't know if it's 1095, but some people talk bad about the high carbon steels because you can get a patina on there. You can polish it out. It's not rust, but they call it a patina. And I had this knife gifted to me by my wife's grandpa, so it means a lot because he only gave so many of these out, and I initialed it right here like he used to do on his knives. And when he gave me this thing, he said, "I want you to use it. I don't want it on a shelf. I don't want you to keep it in a box. Get out and skin animals or do whatever. I want you to use it." So I try to do that. It's a lot different style than I normally carry, but the high carbon steel, getting back to the point, is easy to sharpen, and there might be some discoloration, but as far as functionality, it's great. So I'm going to keep using it. So he said you have the 1095. There is a 5160 spring steel, which is what he made the two other knives for my coworkers. They absolutely loved them. And he literally made them out of truck springs from a pickup truck, which is pretty cool, I thought. And there is a 52100. There's a 1080. There's an 01. After doing all this research, there are so many metals, it can be overwhelming. Well, he said it's a little bit more expensive, but I want you to do some research and look into something called 80 CRV2. 80 CRV2. 80 CRV2 has been in the United States for about 13 years from what I could understand and what I read and did some research and things like that. People used to refer to it as a Swedish saw steel, which is a tongue twister, but most of 80 CRV2 comes out of Germany, and it has pretty tight specs and everything else. There's not a whole lot of flexibility. So that's what I went with. The 80 CRV2, from what I understand, is like a 1095 and a 5160 hybrid, which kind of is like a 5160 on steroids or a 1095 on steroids. As far as the edge retention, the toughness of the blade, there is some flexibility factor as well. So, it just looks awesome. Of course, with the naked eye, you wouldn't be able to tell what kind of steel this is. But I went ahead and upgraded a little bit. So if you order a knife from Thomas, a lot of times I think he'll have you make a down payment to make sure you don't, just if he's making a knife and you run off with it. Makes total sense to me. Since he's 12 miles from my house, I know where he lives and he knows pretty much where I live. I just paid for it up front. So I just gave him the money, and then I did some reviews and stuff like that. I did some videos and put it on YouTube, and then eventually I came over and picked it up, and it's just, it is awesome. It is really, really awesome. So I highly recommend, if you're into custom knives, hand-forged knives, or you want to get somebody a gift or something like that, look at all your options as far as materials and things like that. Look at some of his stuff on, he has other YouTube reviews. He has Instagram, Facebook, everything else. But check out Thomas Hacker or Hackerforgedknives. When you get these knives, let me rip off a piece of paper here. When you get these knives, even though they're handmade, they are the real deal. Let's do some of this here. You get the point. You get the point. Extremely sharp. So I know that this blade here is 40 degrees inclusive. And I've seen some people online and they tear these blades up. I mean, really, they hammer them with a mallet through nails, cable. I saw people cutting pennies with them, and then they're still cutting paper afterwards, which is crazy to think about. Now, if you're going to hard use a knife, you're probably going to have some chipping or rolling on the edge. The videos I watched with ADCRV2, just the edge rolled a little bit, and they were able to get back that edge pretty fast. So because I know that this is 80 or 40 degrees inclusive, I just have an inexpensive sharpening system that I really recommend for you guys. It's $65, and I use this on pretty much all my knives, but it's just the Spyderco Sharp Maker. It's very simple, and it's awesome. So there's 2 grits of stone in here, and then of course I had to buy more. I have the diamond and then the ultra fine. Okay, so I highly recommend that sharpener, and that's what I'll be using for this. I went over a little bit, just kind of messing around with the ultra fine, and this thing is razor sharp. So as far as the price, like I said, I highly believe and am predicting the prices are going to go up, okay, because he's gaining popularity and he's hand making these things. This knife, which he made the pouch sheath and everything else, there's probably 20 hours into this knife. So if you do the math and everything else, you can't charge a low amount for a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, art, this amount of work. You can't, you're not going to find a cheap knife like that. Okay, you're just not, it's not reality. So this knife right here with a sheath, he said, moving forward, this knife or this type of knife is about $423. And again, if you go to his shop and you see the work that he goes through, literally blood, sweat, and tears and everything else, I mean, it's 200 degrees in there. He's hammering this down. He has to heat treat it, grind it. He has to do all the handle work on it. He has to put the edge on it. And then he literally stitched this the day I picked it up. I mean, he was asking me different options the day I picked it up, and it's incredible what he was able to do, honestly. And this is a left-handed sheath, by the way. I asked for that because I am lefty. Some knives I carry on my right side, but I wanted this one on my left. And he said, no problem. So you're looking at about $425. So probably without the sheath, which I can't see anybody doing, but maybe if you already have one, the knife itself is probably going to be about $400. Okay. So I think that's a good price for all the work and everything else he puts into it. And if you look at attention to detail, there's even a little water hole here. So if you're outdoors and you put it in there, some moisture can get out here. With this kind of high carbon steel, I'm most likely not going to keep it in the sheath all the time. And I might put a really thin layer of oil on the burlap micarta, You can oil this a little bit and then put a thin layer. Just keep the blade clean. I mean, you don't want to put a wet blade in the sheath and leave it there for 6 months, because there is going to be a patina on there, but because of the high steel, you're most likely going to see rust if you're sitting it in water. Sometimes it reacts with the leather as well. So something to think about. And overall, I think I covered everything I want to. So this is a part 1 review of 2. So the next review is going to be outside, chopping wood, shaving stuff and doing all kinds of stuff with the knife outdoors. And that's what Thomas wants me to do. He believes his product. He's like, I want you to go out there and do chops and send me some videos and pictures and let me know what you think. Look at the edge and everything else. I will not be cutting metal with a knife. I will not be hammering through a cable or cutting pennies or anything like that. I know it's cool. It is cool. It's an amazing steel. But to me, that goes into the line of knife abuse, and it's great testing, but I don't want to test this knife. It's not something I want to do. I don't want to abuse it and hard use it to test it, because this is the only one I have. So if I were to make knives, I would probably do that. If I had 20 of these, I'd probably do that. But because this is the only one in the world like this, I'm not going to abuse it, but I will use it. Definitely use it. Again, this knife here is the Hacker Forged mountain knife. I really appreciate you guys watching. As always, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and get a hold of Thomas Hacker. If you have a gift in mind for somebody, it doesn't have to be this knife. He makes smaller knives. You'll have to go on his Instagram, call him up. He has a website. I'll put everything below. Get a hold of him, get a quote, ask him about it, save up and get a real hand-forged knife that will last the rest of your life, and you can pass on to other people, which is really cool. So I plan on getting more made. I actually might be picking up a knife, a totally different kind of knife, for my wife today. So I'm going to get a hold of them here in a minute. Another review coming up. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great weekend.